2 good players, 2 creepy weebs, and 1 GM trying to juggle them. And when I say creepy weeb, I mean it. I seriously mean it. Just before we get into this, I really quickly want to thank KRAKENSHIPS for making this possible. KRAKENSHIPS is no ordinary miniature company. KRAKENSHIPS creates rare miniatures you are unlikely to find anywhere else. With the help of their community, KRAKENSHIPS determines what figures to create through direct feedback as well as hours spent on community forums and threads. The primary aim of the company? Fill in the gaps in the miniature world. But we're just cracking the surface. See, I did a thing there. KRAKENSHIPS minis are made from durable and flexible PVC plastic, so they won't snap easily. They're also sized using a 28mm scale. Simply put, they are accurately sized minis when put next to each other. So you won't have a goblin miniature that's confusingly the same size as a minotaur. Whether you're new to the wonderful world of minis or are a miniature collector looking for that one crucial piece nobody seems to have, look up KRAKENSHIPS in the description. Anyways, that aside, roll post. I will be referring to the cast of this story as myself, as the first person pronouns playing a human necromancy wizard. My partner as Lans, playing a reborn zealot barbarian, also the only girl in the party. The GM as the GM. The gnome artificer alchemist as Ozyman. The halfling inquisitor rogue as Weeb number 1. The half-orc fighter, never found out of his subclass, as Weeb number 2. And the pixie death cleric as cleric. So we begin our story with my partner telling me about an advertisement for a game she saw that she wanted me to join with her. The campaign was advertised as a JRPG style campaign, drawing most of its inspiration from Final Fantasy. I've never played Final Fantasy before, so I was kind of hesitant at first due to it being a Japanese anime style game, which of course would attract weebs. I have never met a weeb who is not an absolute weirdo. Not that I'm saying all weebs are weirdos, I've just had bad luck when encountering weebs in the wild. Despite this, my partner reassured me that Final Fantasy weebs are generally much better behaved than other weeb communities. Pause post. Okay, I know we like to dunk on creepy weebs on this channel, but OP must have some incredibly bad luck or bad company to be consistently scraping the 1% of weebs that are completely intolerable. Unfortunately, OP is about to encounter some of the worst of said 1%. Roll post. I haven't had the chance to play in a game for a while, so I naturally jumped at the chance to finally play again as a nice change to GMing for once. We both messaged the GM and we managed to both get in together. I originally wanted to play as a death cleric, my character concept being a human who is part of a death cult, whose high priests are liches. He was directly lifted from my own homebrew world, and I wanted to play as this character because I really enjoyed RPing as him. Unfortunately, the party already had a death cleric, so I switched him to a necromancy wizard. After a few days, I'd finally put my character together, and my partner and I worked out that we were going to have a joint backstory. She was playing a reborn zealot barbarian named Gilbert. The idea was that he died centuries ago, and my character had dug up his remains and reanimated him. However, he retained free will because he had unfinished business in the world. So we get invited to the server. Everything is all going great until Weeb number 1 arrives. After they send their first message, I immediately take a disliking to this person, as their messages consist of that cringy, cutesy, hello, ooh-woo shite. Things go from cringe to alarming as Weeb number 2 joins. And by the end of the day, they're talking about taking slaves to wait on them hand and foot, and to do weird experiments on or just kill for fun. Okay, that escalated rather quickly. There's a very visible, clear line between cringy anime kid behavior and this. There is a whole world out there of the problematic side of the anime community, but this is just sadistic, scummy behavior that I would sooner attribute to a hatred-worshipping edgelord. Regardless of labels, this is very clearly a red flag where the wise would begin to keep a close eye on them, but we will see just how far it goes. Roll post. I decided to step in and try and set a boundary by saying something to the effect of, "My wizard is morally opposed to slavery," which is true. This prompted them to try and bribe me with them getting me a, quote, hot lady or hot boy. I began contemplating leaving the campaign before it had even begun because rape and other forms of non-consensual sex acts is a hard limit for me. I don't include it in the game's IGM, nor would I ever allow it, but I definitely don't want to play in a game with people whose characters are rapists. I brought this up to my partner and we agreed that we would see how the first session went before we decided to leave. And boy, the first session was a hot mess. Pause post. So we are beginning to see the framework of a truly awful duo of players. The way this story will swing is going to greatly depend on how the GM decides to handle these two. If he decides that the Weebs are behaving absolutely unacceptably and lays down the law, or lets it grow into something ugly that nobody wants. But so far, OP and their partners seem to be suspicious, but giving these two the benefit of the doubt. Likely because the GM may have vouched for them. This is where it's gonna get bad, Crabos. Don your thickest shell and grab a potion of poison resistance, cause this is gonna get really toxic, really fast. Roll post. The GM did a great job by shutting down any potential edgelord lone wolves by splitting Lands and myself up and pairing us with each other. We began with me looking for Lands, as her character had been kidnapped by criminals to be sold on an underground exotic creatures market. He paired me up with Weeb number 1 and established that we had already done introduction between the two of us, and we were now looking for Lands to rescue them. Lands did pretty well by herself. She managed to knock out a guard by detaching one of her arms. Her character was pretty much a skeleton, and using it to drag the guard who was just out of her normal arm's reach into her normal reach to knock him out. Meanwhile, Weeb number 1 was hiding, and found Lands and Cleric's belongings, as Cleric had also been captured and put into a cage. He decided that he was going to steal all of it. By this point, Lands had come out of her cage undetected thanks to Ozyman causing a massive ruckus and leading away some of the guards, and freed Cleric, who had disconnected from the call due to internet being knocked out by a storm in her area, and she grappled the rogue to attempt to get her axe at the very least so she at least had a weapon. While this was happening, myself and Weeb number 2 were trying to negotiate Lands' release, and Ozyman had disconnected too because he had to go to a play rehearsal. I should say as a side note, as I forgot to mention earlier, we were supposed to be having a session 0, but it turned into session 1 pretty much out of nowhere, which is why Ozyman had a schedule clash. Anyway, the GM mentioned that I saw Lands walk over to someone behind some boxes, so I walked straight over to them. This caused the merchant to realize the merchandise had escaped, and so began combat. We were using Avray as per the GM's choice, but when we were waiting for the GM to start the initiative, I mentioned that the GM needed to start initiative with an Avray command. He responded with, "I don't go into the Avray stuff, despite the fact he requested we use it." After rolling initiative with a different command instead of the normal one, the enemies just got a free round. The GM just decided they'd all get to have their turns and we couldn't take ours until the next round. I asked if it was a surprise round and he said no, it was not. The guards all transformed into were-rats and took the dodge action. And here's where I realized the GM was just making this combat encounter up on the fly. Because every attack we made was a one-hit kill on these things, Weeb number 1 did 6 damage on his first attack and immediately killed one. Then Lands killed 2 with her great axe that she somehow managed to pry from Weeb number 1's sticky fingers after we all collectively yelled at him to give her the axe. So she at least had a weapon for the combat we were in. We made short work of these were-rats. I looked up their stat blocks once the combat was over. Were-rats have an AC of 13 and 33 HP, and the GM said an attack roll of 10 to hit did in fact hit them. And our damage ranged from 5 to 22 in one attack. All attacks insta-killing the were-rats. After looting corpses and exploring the bazaar, we found a little elf girl asleep inside a box. with the inside of the box having claw marks all over it, as if an animal with claws was trying to escape. The GM described the girl as black-haired, which is very rare, and she has very beautiful blue eyes, as if someone plucked the moons from the sky and put them in her eye sockets. After we woke her up while deciding what to do, Weeb number 1 said, "Ooh, a trapped little elven girl." I don't know for sure if he was going to say or do something disgusting, because I cut him off and told him, if you're going to do some disgusting lolly shit, don't. The party kind of laughed it off, but I was being serious. Thankfully, the Weeb number 1 heeded my advice and instead decided to wake her up. When we woke her up, the GM gave the aforementioned description of her eyes, and then said that we were going to leave it there as a cliffhanger. After that, we chatted for 10 minutes, but Lance and I dipped as soon as we could. During that 10-minute conversation, Weeb number 2 asked the GM that if we hadn't gotten into combat, if they bought lands, would she have a magical slave binding on her which would make her do their bidding? Which the GM confirmed would have happened. We had both agreed we were going to leave the game in PMs with each other, but this fully solidified our decision to leave the campaign. Additional info that I forgot to mention or just wasn't super important, both Weeb number 1 and 2 were getting audibly aggressive with the GM, and the GM was getting audibly frustrated at them as a result. The rogue didn't give Lance her stuff back and actively hid the rest of her stuff, other than her battle axe, of course. During this distraction, Ozzy Man was trying to get an idea of his surroundings, and the GM was being as descriptive and helpful as a brick wall, which was causing him to become audibly frustrated. End post. This is exactly the kind of horror story that more people should be exposed to. Bad people join a game, act like bad people, and get shut down mid-game, mid-sentence even, when they try to cause trouble. This had all the makings of a varsity horror story, but due to good handling by those involved, it did not get as bad as it could have, and the campaign ended there. I've been playing in a campaign for over a year now with the same group, and we've been having a great time. I play an evil elf wizard grandmother type who fears death and is willing to do almost anything for immortality, including once stealing an NPC's body when hers was destroyed. Weird, I know, but the important thing to know here is that she's kind of a terrible person and has no issues with torturing, both psychologically and physically, anyone who gets in her way. It's worth noting that she's not the only evil person in the party, and that hostile actions never extended to party members, unless they've been possessed or whatever. The party dynamic is fine as far as I'm aware. At the very least, it's never been brought up as a problem, and it's not the problem here. We spend most of the session laughing, and our characters get some good chances to hash out morals from time to time, thanks to our different alignments. That aside, let's get to the incident. The party had been ambushed, but had taken one of the attackers alive, my character's nephew. He was known as an evil person, and this wasn't the first time he had ever attacked us, though every time my character had let him escape, always kind of hoping he would turn a new leaf. This time, we did some interrogation, and he had revealed he was part of a cult that had a price on our heads. Now, we had had interactions with cult activity before, but had yet to piece together that it was all connected, and this was the first time we got their name. In retrospect, it was a big reveal for the DM, but in the moment, I was too in character to think about it like that. Instead, I proceeded to rip apart my character's nephew and berate him for joining an organization so absolutely pathetic that we hadn't even noticed its existence. Despite their attempts to get rid of us for months, in character, I was sort of trying to convince him to abandon his affiliation, but my character, also working off an 8 charisma, which I try to roleplay, just continues on with how he and this organization are such failures, and how everything they've done has been so poorly planned that we had actually been thwarting them unintentionally. At this point, the DM got quiet. Though the rest of us were still jovial and chatting, I noticed the DM going quiet. But this wasn't entirely abnormal, and he was on some pain meds at the time, so I put it down to possibly being that. After the game, he sent me a message letting me know that while he knew my words were in character, they had hurt him as I essentially tore down, minimized, and ridiculed what had been a plotline months in the planning and was meant to be a big reveal. I genuinely hadn't considered the impact of my words beyond the NPC. I was speaking to them in character. I apologized and clarified that my feelings did not match my character's, that I appreciated all of his hard work and loved the campaign. I think my DM's feelings were completely justified. I'm a DM myself and can definitely see how my words were hurtful if interpreted as directed to the campaign itself. I also told him I appreciated him reaching out to me and that I would avoid similar incidents in the future. Some other things worth noting. This is the first time an issue like this has been brought up, at least to me. The NPC my character was talking to decided to hold by his guns and was executed by the party, which my character didn't want, but I didn't interfere with. I have had issues with crossing lines and not noticing when things had gone too far before in my life. It's just something I'm not good at noticing, which is why I want a third party's opinion here. So, am I the asshole for insulting my DM's campaign and all the hard work he had done? Or was I justified by in-character motivations and lack of malicious intent? Should I be more careful and censored in how I play my characters, or should I continue playing my character how I have been and just work on establishing clear in-character and out-of-character boundaries with my DM? On the offhand chance my DM reads this, I am so sorry for the pain I caused you, and I hope you know that I truly love being in your campaign and all the work you do. TLDR, I insult an NPC's plots and the organization he was a part of, calling them pathetic, ineffectual, and beneath our notice. The DM feels like this is commentary on his campaign and is hurt by my in-character comments, although they don't reflect my out-of-character feelings. This was a very interesting story, especially because this happens all the time, to all of us. Miscommunication, saying the wrong things and not even knowing it. The right people will know that you didn't mean what you said, and the DM here seems to even have gone a step above that, understandably informing OP and letting them know what they did. Honestly, the DM just sounds like a good friend. Anyways, that's all folks. Here are a couple more stories, and as usual, till next time.